We have a great team of speakers today. The concept of our event is that we have two keynote speakers. It's Artem Fylypenko, director of Danube-Black Sea Region Department at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, and Plamen Dimitrov, Bulgarian Geopolitical Society, Bulgaria. I think that Artem and Plamen will give us they said the same. They give us the food for discussion. Maybe they will provoke some new questions, new talks, and new understanding of the situation. And after this, we'll try to answer some questions Artem and Plamen will create. Now, without further delay, I will give the floor to Plamen Dimitrov. I think that it will be 15 minutes enough to give us your understanding, Plamen, and please, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for organizing this interesting discussion. I'm going to speak about the changes in Bulgaria that have taken place since 1989. Just because this big political change in Bulgaria happened not 30 years ago, but 32 years ago in 1989. About economic, political, and social changes. And after that, I will say some words about the geopolitical orientation of Bulgaria, of contemporary Bulgaria, and something about the relations between Bulgaria and Ukraine in these 30 years after the independence of Ukraine. Starting with the history, I have to say that Bulgaria was one of the most faithful satellites of the Soviet Union during the period of Cold War. And the political changes in Bulgaria in November 1989 took place mainly under the pressure of the external circumstances related to the international environment. Bulgarian politics, economy, and society have changed completely since 1989, of course. And the one-party political system in Bulgaria was put down at the end of 1989. And in 1991, the opposition won the parliamentary elections for the first time. In speaking about politics, in the last decade of the 20th century, the main political contradiction in Bulgaria was between the former communists grouped in the Socialist Party and the anti-communists that were mainly members of the Union of Democratic Forces. So these two political parties, Socialist Party and Union of Democratic Forces, ruled the country in 1990s. The end of this story came in 2001 when the former Bulgarian king returned back to the country. He decided to go for president at first, but he was not allowed to participate in the presidential elections just because he hadn't lived in Bulgaria in the last 5 years or 5 or 10 years. I don't remember exact term, but anyway, in this situation, the king established his own political party, won the parliamentary elections, and became prime minister of Bulgaria in 2001. So in the new century, we have this period at first, the rule of the former king. After that, the one term of ruling of coalition between Socialist Party and King's Party and Party of Turkish Political Minority. And in 2009, the new period started, the period of domination of political party GERB in Bulgaria, the period that ended this spring, so more than 1 decade. What we can say about this period? Ideologies were not important in this period because GERB is leadership political party. It is formed around the personality of its leader, and it's I can say a catch-all type political party or umbrella political party that make efforts to embrace all political groups and social groups in Bulgarian society and to attract voters from all these groups. It is also populist party, I can say. There were only one person that dominated Bulgarian political life in this last 11 years, I can say. And finishing with this political development, I'd like to mention one interesting fact that in all Bulgarian parliaments in the last 30 years, the ethnic party of Turkish minority was presented. Maybe you know, we have 8 or 9% Turkish minority in Bulgaria. So this political party called Movement for Rights and Freedoms was constant factor in Bulgarian political life. Maybe it is different if we compare with Ukraine. Speaking about the economy, the main process that had taken place after 1989 was the privatization of Bulgarian economy. But this process has started a little bit later than in other Eastern European and Central European countries. So in Bulgaria, the main wave of the privatization was at the end of 20th century and the beginning of 21st century. Now the biggest part of Bulgarian economy is private. Bulgaria, as a member of European Union, has its own trade partners, countries in the European Union, of course. And the country is the poorest in the European Union, but it doesn't matter that Bulgarian economic development was unsuccessful in the last 30 years. For example, if we compare GDP per capita, Bulgaria is in better position than Ukraine, than other former Soviet republics, and then the countries in the Western Balkans. Speaking about the social changes, I think the main social change in this period was the demographic decline of Bulgaria. In 1989, the population of the country was almost 9 million people. Now it is 2 million people less, a little bit less than 7 million people. And the main reason for this demographic change is the low fertility rate that is typical for all developed countries in the world, for Europe, Eastern Asia, etc. And also emigration from Bulgaria to the European countries mainly. But recently, we can observe that this process is close to the end. I think in the last 2 years, people who return back to Bulgaria are a little bit more than people who emigrated in European countries. But anyway, the demographic projections for Bulgaria are not optimistic just because of this low fertility rate in the country. And it will be a problem for the social system in Bulgaria in the future. But again, it is not a specific feature for Bulgaria only. Speaking about geopolitical orientation of the country, in the first several years after the fall of communism, Bulgaria had no very clear geopolitical orientation. The things became clear after 1997, when Bulgaria applied for membership in the NATO and European Union. And in 2004, Bulgaria became member of NATO. Since the beginning of 2007, became member of the European Union. And I think for the time being, these two memberships are the main pillars that define Bulgarian foreign policy. So no one disputed seriously the membership of Bulgaria in these two organizations, despite the fact that there was no referendum on Bulgaria entered the European Union and NATO. Most probably at that time it was the dominant orientation of the people in the country. So being member of the European Union, Bulgaria lost many instruments. I think Bulgarian government lost many instruments to govern the country, because you know many things depends on Brussels on the European level, and it is again the same for all European Union members. Being a member of the European Union and NATO, Bulgaria still has specific relations with Russia, mainly because of historical reasons and because of the Bulgarian energy dependence on Russia. It is also historical heritage. Just to mention here that Bulgarian Kingdom, the Third Bulgarian Kingdom, was created in 19th century after the victorious war of Russian Empire against the Ottoman Empire. So since that time, Russians received the image of liberator of Bulgaria. And during the Soviet time, Bulgaria was practically a satellite country of Soviet Union, of Moscow, and had a very strong economic interdependence with Russia. And still now the main energy sources of Bulgaria come from Russia. I mean oil, natural gas, this fuel for nuclear power plant in Bulgaria. And speaking about relations with Ukraine, I can say that until 2014, Bulgaria was not, Ukraine was not very visible in Bulgaria. It was just one of these former Soviet republics. Even ordinary Bulgarians who are not so sure is Odessa, for example, in Russia or in Ukraine, etc. And Ukraine became visible during this crisis of 2014 with the annexation of Crimea by Russia, with this separatist revolt in Donbass that was supported financially, military, and politically by Russia also. So at that time, for Bulgarians, it became clear that there is a conflict in this post-Soviet space, and Ukraine is something completely different from Russia. And many Bulgarians ask themselves who is right and who is wrong in this dispute between Russia and Ukraine. Here I have to mention the existence of this Bulgarian minority in Ukraine. A substantial number of ethnic Bulgarians live in Ukraine. According to the last census in Ukraine, they are a little bit more than 200,000 people. And 64% of them indicated Bulgarian as their mother language. 30% indicated Russian as mother language, and 5% Ukrainian, speaking about this Bulgarian minority. Of course, Bulgaria, as a member of European Union and NATO, did not recognize the legitimacy of the annexation of Crimea by Russia. And in general, I can say in this crisis in 2014, Bulgaria was a predictable partner in the European Union and did not give any signs that it would jeopardize the European consensus on the Ukrainian crisis. But in the same time, Bulgaria was not in the group of the countries that insisted for stronger pressure against Russia. In this conflict in 2014, I can say that this conflict divided Bulgarian society. There is a sociological survey from April 2014 that showed the Bulgarians supporting Russia in this conflict with Ukraine were slightly more than those supporting Ukraine. To the question, do you approve the accession of Crimea to Russia? 35% of Bulgarians answered yes, 27% answered no, and 38% I don't know, I have no opinion. It is according to the survey conducted by Gallup International. In this conflict, Russia relies on its century-old cultural and historical influence in Bulgaria, and as well as on its financial and information power. Maybe you know that there is almost no language barrier between Bulgarians and Russians, and Bulgarians from older generation speak Russian and can watch Russian TV to read Russian newspapers, etc. And Russian propaganda at that time and even now has been well accepted by a substantial part of the society and by some political and intellectual circles in Bulgaria. This annexation of Crimea in 2014 increased Russian military and political activity in the Black Sea region. And that was one of the reasons for re-evaluating a strategy of NATO. And Bulgaria being a member of NATO, I can say Bulgaria was in new situation, speaking about geopolitics and international security and national security. Just because this Ukrainian crisis gave a new meaning to the Bulgarian membership in this North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Before 2014, Bulgarian soldiers participated, Bulgarian military contingents participated in missions of NATO in Kosovo, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, etc. And since 2014, I can say that NATO was perceived through the prism of this good old territorial defense. NATO was created for territorial defense and it returned back to this territorial defense in 2014. And at that time, Bulgaria became a part of the threatened eastern flank of NATO. And some measures were undertaken by NATO strategists to fortify this eastern flank, to answer this stronger Russian military presence in the Black Sea region. And again, all these measures were in the framework of collective defense. It was not something that was initiated by Bulgaria individually, just because Bulgarian defense is part of the collective defense of NATO. Speaking about the current situation, geopolitical situation in the Balkans, I can say that, again, to repeat this, Bulgaria is a reliable partner in the European Union and NATO. But Bulgaria is not a supporter of this strong anti-Russian measures, anti-Russian sanctions of the European Union. Bulgaria is a little bit more moderate country in the Union, I can say. It is not in the group of these countries like Romania, like Poland, like Baltic countries. Of course, Bulgaria supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And in the same time, I can say that despite the fact of this clear confrontation between NATO and Russia in the Black Sea region, for Bulgarians, this is not the main direction of our foreign policy. Looking at these confrontations, looking in the Black Sea region. Now, for example, Bulgarians are interested much more in the situation with the candidacy of North Macedonia in the European Union, and in this dispute between Bulgaria and North Macedonia, then in the security issues in the Black Sea region. Speaking pragmatically from economic point of view, for example, for Bulgarian business is better to have more Russian tourists in Bulgaria, more Ukrainian tourists, of course, but Russia is a bigger country, than to be involved in such a kind of confrontation in this Black Sea region. I think I have to stop here and be ready to answer questions and to participate in discussions later.
Thank you very much, Plamen. It was really comprehensive pictures and really panoramic view of the Bulgarian situation, Bulgarian point of view. We have some new messages and reactions on your speech. I think Alexander Malinov wrote that Russian culture influence in Bulgaria is not as strong as Russian propaganda says. You can compare the situation in Ukraine, Armenia, even Baltic states with Russian minorities. In Bulgaria, the main culture influence comes from Central and Western Europe, and this was true in 19th and 20th century as well. There is no Russian TV or other Russian media in Bulgaria, nor do Bulgarians have some strong personal connections with Russian mixed families. And he asked how can tourism be more important than national security? I think this question and this opinion could be as an additional provocation for further discussion. Now I'd like to give the floor to Artem Fylypenko. Plamen told us about some minority issues. Artem living in Odessa, and he understands the situation from the ground, I would say. So, Artem, please explain us the Ukrainian point of view on Ukraine and Bulgarian geopolitical relations and Ukrainian geopolitics in the region, and of course some minority issues and questions and maybe problems, and how we can solve these problems. Artem, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for such a possibility to give you a Ukrainian vision. Really, I live in Odessa region, where the majority of Bulgarian minority, Bulgarians, Ukrainian Bulgarians lives, and as a journalist in my young years, I concerned a lot problems of Bulgarians, especially it was a time when it was at first time an attempt to organize a separatist Bessarabian Republic. I will talk about this, but now I propose you maybe some not retrospective, but some view on Ukrainian-Bulgarian relations. What about political relations of Ukraine and Bulgaria? Now we have 92 bilateral agreements, 9 of them interstate, 32 intergovernmental, and 58 interagency. Treaty of Friendly Relations and Cooperation between Ukraine and Republic of Bulgaria was signed on March 1994. Last years we have rather intensive contacts between Ukraine and Bulgaria. For example, since 2014. For example, in July of 2015, it was an official visit of the President of the Republic of Bulgaria, Plamen, to Ukraine. April 2016. It was another visit, walking visit of Plamen to Ukraine. In June 2013, official visit of President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, and May 2018, the working visit of the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, Boyko Borisov, to Ukraine. As we see now that it is a very intensive relations, so it's a very intensive activity. Unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate, but if we say about dynamics of economic relation, mutual trade, we can see that
Artem, I'm sorry, you could just switch the demonstration of your share the your monitor.
But it shows me that it switched off, unfortunately. Unfortunately, it's impossible. Okay, I will continue. Just a minute. Okay, if you say about mutual trade, we have a tendency that it was since 2013. It's a last pre-war year. Practically, we have some fall in export operations, but at the same time in import and in import operations too. Practically all these years we have a positive balance in for Ukraine in our mutual trade. If we say about main merchant groups, for example, from Ukraine, the main merchant group is ferrous metals and products of them. It's 62%. Railway locomotives and equipment for new nuclear power plants. From Bulgaria, the main merchant is fuel and petroleum products, fertilizers 15.2%, and mechanical equipment and mechanism 14%. Ukraine for Bulgaria is one of the main trade partners. For example, mutual trade, it's take 1.4% of foreign trade, Bulgarian trade, 1.1% of export, 1.6% of import. At the same time, Bulgaria for Ukraine is not so important, but at the same time, it's above 0.7 of foreign trade, 1% of export, and 0.5% of import is import from Bulgaria. For another main sphere of cooperation is tourism, and the quantity of tourists from Ukraine rise from year to year, and the last pre-COVID year, 2019, it was about 470,000 tourists from Ukraine in Bulgaria. Unfortunately, a quantity of tourists from Bulgaria to Ukraine is less, because it's about 92 or 99 and sometimes such figures. And we have also some key problems in economical cooperations. That is, for example, lack of investments, lack of free capitals, bad infrastructure, but some problems now solved with Orlovka Isaksha Pharaoh and other. On political level and the problems of security, I can mention that, for example, in Strategy of National Security of Bulgaria, it is noted that the Republic of Bulgaria considers the Black Sea region is in a wide European and Euro-Atlantic context for deepening cooperation between countries in economic, trade and security. This region is especially important in the context of development of the network of transportation of main energy resources, linking manufacturers with energy markets in Europe. And in Strategy of National Security of Bulgaria is mentioned the crisis in Ukraine and illegal annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, which leads to the violation of geostrategic and military balance. But at the same time, in Bulgarian's strategy for national security, didn't mention Russia. If we compare, for example, with the same document of Romania, where they directly say about threats from Russian side. At the same time, in Ukrainian strategy of national security, also didn't mention Bulgaria as a partner. At the same time, we can say only that 2 points about developing partnership relations with others countries of Baltic countries and friendship relations with countries of Central and Southern Eastern Europe. And again, a practical cooperation with countries members of NATO in granting security in Black Sea region. That's why we can mention in this way that it is maybe the only mention of Bulgaria, or maybe we can in this document. Really, the hybrid war of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, which began in 2014, become one of the key factors that affects Ukrainian foreign policy in the Black Sea region. Ukraine reload practically relations with two Black Sea countries like Romania and Turkey, but Ukrainian-Bulgarian relations marked by certain controversiality, which is due to the specific of foreign policy of Bulgaria. An indicator is attitude of Bulgarian politicians, political elite, to the status of temporarily occupied territory of Crimea. For example, officially Bulgaria do not recognize annexation of Crimea, and President Plamen declared that he not recognized so-called referendum in Crimea and so-called referendums in separate districts of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. But at the same time, in February 2015, it was a visit of members of Bulgarian parliament to Crimea, and a leader of Party Ataka, Valent Sidorov, said that he recognized the referendum in Crimea and its results. Roman Radev also, during his electoral campaign after the second tour, said that in relations to the status of Crimea, it's necessary to be realistic, and yes, it is a violation of international law, but at the same time, the fact is that at this moment under Crimea, we can see a Russian flag. At the same time, since the beginning of Russian aggression, the ruling Bulgarian elites conducts a foreign policy which characterized, maybe by some Bulgarians or Ukrainian experts, like a geopolitical twine. It means that from one side, as a member of European Union and NATO, Bulgaria demonstrates loyalty to these organizations, while trying to maintain good relations with Russia. For example, Bulgaria is headed in the NATO Trust Fund for medical rehabilitation, which helps Ukraine to improve the quality standards of medical rehabilitation for soldiers who were injured. And since 2015 in Bulgaria was about 200 of Ukrainian soldiers rehabilitated. At the same time, military potential, we understand the military potential of Bulgaria is not maybe sufficient. I can mention a document which called governmental document Bulgaria to NATO and European Defense 2020, which was issued in 2014, in which they say that more than 2 billion lions spent on defense over the past 10 years since joining NATO and 7 years since European Union membership only resulted in minimal new military capabilities due to the poor planning, management and control, the absence of a program of state defense investment and refusal to use mechanisms acceptable to NATO and the European Union membership in practice. Recent years spending of Bulgaria for military purposes was about 1.4, 1.7 GDP. Only in 2019 it was we have a record defense budget. It was connected with a buying of multi-purpose command fighter F-16s. Also, we can see that Bulgarian naval forces is also insufficient in comparison, for example, with the fleet of Russia, and practically it's made a situation when Russia dominates in the Black Sea region. One of key point in relations of two countries, I think it's a relation of Bulgarian minority in Ukraine. Here lives above 200,000 of Bulgarians. A majority of them, above 150,000, some or in other figures, say about in other figures, but the majority of them live on Odessa region, on the south of Odessa region, in so-called Bessarabia. Historical name of this region is called Bessarabia. They lived there for more than 200 years. But at the same time, Ukraine, since 90s, tried to satisfy cultural and maybe in educational some needs of Bulgarian minority, but at the same time we know that this minority is known as for their sympathies to pro-Russian political parties. I mean, they voted firstly for communists, then for Party of Regions, and now for opposition platform for life. Russia have a strong temptation to use these pro-Russian sympathies to provoke separatism in this region. First time, as I mentioned it was made in 90s when on the way of centrifugal trends in the Soviet Union, local communist officials and some national activists tried to organize a Bessarabian republic. A second attempt was in April 2015 when it was founded People's Council of Bessarabia, which threatened Ukraine with the creation of Bessarabia People's Republic. The creation of council also on the first meeting of this council participated a member of Party of Ataka. But this attempt was stopped by Ukrainian security service of Ukraine. Thus, all national communities who represent ethnic groups of Bessarabia, they declare that they do not have any have nothing with this organization. And I can only mention this, that one of their role in organizing such a Bessarabian Republic plays an officer of so-called Ministry of State Security of unrecognized Transnistrian Moldavian Republic. Also, it was in 2017, two provocations were organized with using of Bulgarian factor. For example, in February in Belgrade, it's so-called capital of Bulgarians of Ukraine, was vandalized a monument for Bulgarian militias. It was written on one of the walls, suitcase station Sofia. And in April, Security Service of Ukraine also reported about prevention of another provocation in Odessa. It was planned to carry out a fake march of so-called Bulgarians. It was not Bulgarians, it was representatives of another ethnics, which must protest under the Bulgarian consulate against suppressing of minorities. But during the march, they should be attacked by false Ukrainian nationalist organization or representatives, and this should make a good film picture for Russian TV. And also we can connect it, we can remind that in May 2020 Bulgarian parliament protested against reform on decentralization in Ukraine because, as deputies thought, it threatened Bulgarian minority, but in this question it was reached a compromise. Bulgarian district in which lives majority of Bulgarians, it was preserved, but as a result of it we have another problems. At first one, if in old Bulgaria districts it was 76% of Bulgarians, now in new Bulgaria districts we have above 60% of Bulgarians, and at the same time we have a ground for some social conflict inside this district. In finishing, I can mention maybe some directions in which I think we have a possibility to cooperate with. First, it is cooperation in questions of transport and infrastructure. You know, it still exists, but it works very bad affair between Chernomorsk and Varna. Then we can cooperate inside a framework of Danube strategy for European strategy of European Union for Danube region, especially in ecological questions for preserving Danube from pollution and so on. Then cooperation in questions of military technologies, cooperation in questions of combating hybrid threats, first of all information war, because Ukraine have another experience for helping Bulgarians in this case. And last but not least, it's a cooperation between military power, especially between navies of two our countries. Just I finish, and I think that we can discuss another more.
Thank you very much, Artem. It was really comprehensive and again panoramic view from the Ukrainian side. And I think now we have enough for discussion. We have great speeches from our colleagues Artem, Fylypenko, and Plamen, Dimitrov. Provocative enough. They told us about a lot of problems, really problems, which we have not only between our countries, but in the understanding of by our countries, the real and practical situation on the ground. Now we have two official discussants in our event. It's Vassil Sotirov, Vice President of European Journalists Association, Bulgaria, and Igor, Head of the Southeastern Europe section of New Geopolitics Research Network. I think that now it will be logical to give them floor to make some reactions and own opinions on the speeches of our keynote speakers, and maybe some own positions and own thoughts about the geopolitical platform of our countries, the geopolitical situation in our region, and maybe some propositions how to deal with this situation. After this, I think we could open the discussion, because I personally have a lot of questions after these two speeches in regional issues, in Ukrainian and Bulgarian relations, and maybe some provocative questions. I will make them, be sure. So now, please, Mr. Sotirov, please give us your understanding of the situation and maybe reactions on what you heard now from our keynote speakers. The floor is yours. Please switch on your microphone.
Do you hear me? Yes? Okay. May I just first ask, do we have some other people of those listening, or they're not, because many names here, several names. Is some of them really present, or
actually
waiting?
We have an online presentation on the Facebook, so it's impossible to control all of people who watch us. So, but we have 14 participants officially on the Zoom, but we have a parallel on the Facebook online translation.
Thank you. May I just start with what Artem said about the historic relations between Bulgaria and Ukraine, and this is something I think we have to press on if we want to increase the ground for really good relations between Bulgaria and Ukraine. I agree that in the last 30 years, probably Ukraine has been left out of Bulgarian attention and vice versa. But really, if we come to history, this is very important, in which we can use in the future as a basis to strengthen the relationship. And really, the fact that Ukraine, although it's part of the Soviet Empire, of the Russian Empire, sorry, was really the closest part to Bulgaria. And the historic ties, really, much of those historic ties, which have been the historical narrative of the relations between Bulgaria and the former Soviet Union, really concern the relations between Bulgarian and Ukrainians, because Ukraine was closest to Bulgaria. And this is why, by the way, this big Bulgarian minority exists there, because these were people who are fleeing from the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman repression. When we speak about the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78, which as a result of which of the Third Bulgarian Kingdom was established, many of those who took part in this war were Ukrainians, not only Russians, probably, if not more, the bigger part of them. So this is something which we have to emphasize. Another point I want to make was about Bulgaria, the official Bulgarian position. Mr. Artem spoke about Ataka several times, and about the leader of Ataka, Sotirov. I think we should not overestimate the influence of this political party in our country. In the last election, just 2 months ago, Attacker appeared alone and gained less than 1% of the votes. And it was Sotirov who was one of those Bulgarian members of parliament, deputies who visited Crimea in, I don't remember, 216 or 2016 probably it was.
15.
15, yes. So I don't think this is pay much attention to that. Really, there is a problem for Bulgaria to kind of for Bulgarian politicians, especially to be so how to say balanced in their positions between Ukraine and Russia, because you know, Bulgaria is a small and poor country, is now at the forefront of this strained relationship, which is threatening to turn into a major war in our region. And Bulgaria, I think not only Bulgaria, but we can see this tendency in many European countries, especially European Union countries, including Germany and France, which are reluctant to support a very anti-Russian position, which might lead to war, because no one in Europe really wants that. And for Bulgaria, this is especially important because not only because of historical ties with Russia, but with our historical experience has been such that Bulgaria has always suffered very, very much as a result of war between big powers here, especially on the Balkans. I want to make another point about this real situation, real danger, which is developing in the last several months. Our region, the Black Sea region, including the Balkans, of course, because it's an inseparable part of this region. This region is turning now probably as the most important flashpoint in which all big world powers, superpowers, are included, including Russia, including the United States, including China. Now, this is the place, if we consider it in a bit wider sphere, including the Eastern Mediterranean, which is probably the hottest conflict, which might lead us to a new war in the future. And this is why everyone is very cautious in this situation. And this explains to a large part the Bulgaria, which is afraid to be on the front line in such a war, which no one really wants. But I would like to hear some more your points and to go on discussing after that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sotirov. And I think that your speech opened the one more question. Should Ukraine and Bulgaria will be active on geopolitics, or will be passive and wait what will major powers decide on the region and global developments? This is the permanent question what we have here in Ukraine, and talking about what should be the Ukrainian geopolitics. It should be a subject or object of the international relations and the process we have now. Ukraine is really now on the front line, and if you look at the last developments in a couple months, when Russia is concentrating huge military infrastructure close to Ukrainian, absolutely close to Ukrainian border. And for example, 2 days ago, Russian Minister of Defense Shoigu told again that they will build more new 20 units, like brigades, close to Ukrainian border. And this is really dangerous in case of that. Unfortunately, it looks like NATO and European Union don't have a strong or even clear strategy and concept how to deal with it. They try to be calm, try to be not provocative regarding Russia, but it looks like the Russians like this situation, and they trying to play high and high on this bargain. And okay, everybody could say that 16th of June, when Biden and Putin will meet in Switzerland, it will be the key point of next geopolitics. But should we just be passive and wait what happened in 16th of June, or maybe we'll try to change the situation by ourselves? On this moment, I think this question could be next on our discussion. But now I'll give the floor to Igor Fedyk from New Geopolitics Research Network and ask him to give his opinion and reactions on what you heard, Igor, and what you propose, maybe answering some questions which appear during our discussion. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mykhailo. You just mentioned very important topics that we will discuss later. But now, let me give my some thoughts about the Ukrainian and Bulgarian relations, about how the countries have developed during these 30 years. So today we are talking about how Ukraine and Bulgaria are developing during the time that passed from the collapse of the Soviet Union, from time they moved away from the communist era. We're talking about successes and problems and the reasons why the countries have gone this way and not another. But among all the conclusions that can be made, to my opinion, the most important is that Ukrainian and Bulgarian peoples have made the right civilizational choice, which is the development of their countries as civilized European democracies, and which is completely opposite to that authoritarian kleptocracies personified by Putin's Russia and its satellites. And the recent events in Belarus with the detention of Roman Protasevich, former editor of NATO Live Telegram channel, or poisoning and further imprisonment by Kremlin of the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny are the clear evidence of this. Yet not everything in our countries is as good as we would like it to be, but it's definitely better than innovative version of the Soviet Union, which Kremlin is trying to build with its satellites today. If we talk about where our countries have come to after the collapse of the Soviet Union, well, everything is less or more obvious. Ukraine and Ukrainians, during gaining independence in '91, by the time to finish with the communist past, they later proclaimed the course for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. However, in practice, Ukraine acted quite modestly and with constant looking back at Moscow, which, thanks to its political and economical levers, still retained strong influence on me. There was also a period when Ukraine, not of course without help of Moscow, de jure declared a status of non-alignment, which in practice was more like a drift towards Russia. The turning point came in 2014 when, by a revolution of dignity, the Ukrainians showed that they didn't want to return to Moscow restored USSR 2.0, but to develop a civilized European country. The price that Ukraine paid for such a choice is well known. The annexation of Crimea, the occupation of its territories in the east, and the war with Russia, which has already been going on for 7 years. As for Bulgaria, it started, as our Bulgarian colleagues said, it started in, its farewell to communism started in 1989. This period is known in Bulgarian history as transition, and like other post-socialist regimes in Eastern Europe, Bulgaria found the transition to capitalism rather painful and not easy as expected. But nevertheless, despite all the difficulties, Bulgaria was admitted to NATO in 2004 and to EU in 2007. And membership in these alliances has enabled the country to be part of the Western world and to enjoy all the benefits it offers. At the same time, due to maintaining its ties to Bulgaria, the existence of Russophilia in the country and the activities of local political and business elites, Russia has the possibility to influence the country. And there is the great hope that the changes that began in the country after the last parliamentary elections will have a positive impact on Bulgarian foreign policy, especially on the reduction of the Moscow's influence. Having the experience of living in Bulgaria, I would like to know some similarities that are inherent in our states and which are largely the consequence of the common communist past. The first thing that is striking the eye is the division of society into pro-Western and pro-Russian, which is something that, for example, is not the case in most European countries. Also, in both countries, there is a nostalgia for the communist times. Due to such nostalgia, certain political forces, which are essentially pro-Russian, may still be afloat. However, the possibilities are limited as the base of nostalgic people, which is mainly older generation, is gradually decreasing. On the contrary, the younger the population, the less it grieved to the communist times, and which is a very positive trend. Another one is the high level of corruption. According to Transparency International, in 2012, Bulgaria was the last country in the European Union in terms of combating the corruption and the 69th in the world. As for Ukraine, the situation is even worse. It's on the 117th place. And such a situation is one of the main reasons for blocking the effective development of the countries and increasing the welfare of population. And this is the reason what Artem said is for lack of investments as well. Another one is the low level in trust in the state authorities and politicians. For example, in Ukraine, 77% distrust the parliament, 76% distrust the government, and 61% distrust the president of Ukraine. In Bulgaria, 67% distrust the parliament, and 60% distrust the government. The only difference is the trust in president. In Bulgaria, the level of distrust in president is only 33%. The main reason for that is that incumbent Bulgarian president is personified as an antagonist to the political system which has been established in the country, and for the change of which the citizens protested last year. Another one is the state authorities' efforts to control the law enforcement agencies, in the courts, prosecutors' office, the anti-corruption bodies. And as a result of this, as well as being corrupted, they, like the state authorities, enjoy low-level support of public and are considered to serve them, the business elites, but not the interest to ordinary people. It's not impossible to come into power in both countries, the political forces of showmen, the several people in Ukraine, and there is such a nation in Bulgaria, which didn't have the clear political program, but because of their leaders' popularity and this dissatisfaction with political and socio-economical situation in the country. And that resulted in a protest vote. In Ukraine, it was against President Poroshenko, and in Bulgaria, against Prime Minister Borisov. So they have received high support from the population. Another common thing is that the main media are controlled by media tycoons, who are often either part of ruling powers or have close ties with them. And as a result, the population is often unable to obtain objective information about real states of affairs in the country, as well how the country is perceived abroad. And as it was also mentioned before, the low interest in both countries or to each other. For example, the countries appear in the media of each other only in case of significant events, such as, for instance, the protests in Bulgaria on the escalation of Russian aggression in Ukraine, or issues with the, also was mentioned, the issues with the Ukrainian minority in Ukraine, which are a good opportunity for politicians in both Bulgaria and Ukraine to use them in their own interests. And the provided information is not always objective, because, for example, and I'm always wondering about the news about Ukraine and Bulgaria is mostly taken from Russian information resources or the Ukrainian pro-Russian ones. And very important thing, which also is, I would say, up to 2014, it was common, but now the situation is changing. So it's the neglecting of security and defense issues, which is also most likely provoked by Moscow, and which results in a low level of reforms, modernization, and rearmament of the armed forces. For Ukraine, this was, as I mentioned, quite significant up to 2014. In general, Ukraine can be the example for Bulgaria in terms of strengthening its defense capabilities, because until 2014, Ukraine also declared that it was a peaceful country and was not going to fight anyone, and didn't expect an attack from anywhere, and all the more from Russia. However, the events of 2014 show that such a policy was totally wrong. Today in Bulgaria, even in the context of Russian aggression against Ukraine and Russian militarization in the Black Sea, the security and defense issues are still being ignored, and in fact, the country repeat the mistake that Ukraine made before 2014. And of course, we should mention some Russian influence in both countries. Of course, Russia is not to blame for all the problems of Ukraine and Bulgaria, but unfortunately, it is a fact that it continues to have an influence on the development of the countries, their bilateral relations, and perceptions of each other. The Moscow's main goal in relation to Ukraine is to destroy its statehood, it's clear, to turn it into some kind of a gray zone between Russia and the West. As for Bulgaria, this goal is to maintain its influence in the country, especially its political elite and energy sector, and to prevent deeper integration into NATO and EU. In order to do so, it is waging hybrid wars against both countries, and has a whole set of tools for that, from corrupted politicians to energy weapons and propaganda. In Ukraine, it also has a military lever, which it periodically turns on when the others do not give the desired effect. The recent tensions along the Ukrainian-Russian border and in the Black Sea is the vivid evidence of this. As it has already been said, in both countries, there is a division of society into pro-Western and pro-Russian, and Russian is working purposefully to make this division even bigger. This is being done primarily through the use of a powerful propaganda machine, which is, as in Soviet times, works to discredit the West and to promote the greatness and power of Russia and the benefits of cooperating with it. As a result, in Ukraine until 2014, the support for country's accession to NATO was only up to 19%. Now it's about 50%, and now the support for EU accession is more than 60%. In Bulgaria, for example, which is a NATO member, the public support for NATO has continued to declare in the recent 15 years, and now is at level of some 30, 35, 36%. In addition, many Bulgarian citizens believe that life in the country has become worse than joining the EU. By using its propaganda, Russia is trying to influence the history of both countries and form stereotypes in it. As for Ukraine, this is a complete denial of Ukrainian history, identity, language, culture, and calling them all part of the great Russian culture and history. Bulgaria has centuries been told that it owes the existence of independent Bulgarian state to Russia, which liberated it from Turkish rule, and that Bulgarians should be forever grateful for that. In communist times, another status was added to this, that the Soviet Union liberated Bulgaria from the fascism. However, in reality, there were no clashes between German and Soviet troops on Bulgarian territory. Russia also has an impact on bilateral relations between two countries. The contraction of Turk Stream 2 or refusal to strengthen NATO naval presence in the Black Sea do nothing with promotion of Ukraine and Bulgarian relationship. A special mention should be made about the neutralization by Russian special services of ammunition in Bulgarian military depots, which was intended for Ukraine. Despite as for bilateral relations, despite the positive information about Ukrainian and Bulgarian relations, which, for example, is contained on the website of the Ukrainian embassy, it is obvious that these relations lack mutual interest, and it was also mentioned by the previous speakers here. Bulgaria, for example, tends more to the Balkan region than to the Black Sea. The Ukrainian interest in economic cooperation with Bulgaria is of a point nature and doesn't reflect the intergovernmental agreements and opportunities of the sectors of the economies of both countries. However, I believe that our relations have a great potential. In general, summarizing my speech, I would like to say something that I said in the beginning, that the countries are moving away from their communist past, and this is the greatest achievement in the last 30 years, despite all the problems, common problems which I mentioned before. Yeah, this movement is quite difficult because of the local problems, and because both countries have the external force that doesn't want us to put up with this. However, if we want to be a successful European countries, we need to do our part and do not pay attention on what other wants from us, especially Moscow. And the same applies to our bilateral relations, which have a great potential, as I mentioned before, and I believe and which should be developed without looking back at Moscow. And I would like to finish with the slogan of the Bulgarian political force, Democratic Bulgaria, which says Bulgaria can do much more. I completely agree with it, and I would like to add that Ukraine and Ukrainian-Bulgarian relations can do also much more. So I'll stop here and be glad to continue in the frames of further discussion.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely, we could do much more, and I'd like to open the floor for discussion, for general discussion. I think we have enough of speeches and enough information to discuss and food. Now I'd like to ask Valery Rachev, who is participating in our discussion, and he is absolutely great, famous here in Ukraine on the security and defense issues and reforms and analyzing the situation, and especially in Black Sea. I'd like to ask Valery Rachev about his opinion on the Black Sea region situation, and what do you think about the Bulgarian and Ukrainian prospects to join capabilities in building more strong military infrastructure in Black Sea fleet, in Black Sea. I mean that Romania and Ukraine now is pretty close to make joint projects and cooperate in Navy fields, and I think that it will be one of the most successful direction. What about Bulgaria? Could we speak about the trilateral cooperation, Ukraine, Romania, and Bulgaria, to create some forces enough to balance Black Sea Fleet, Russian Black Sea Fleet in the region, because unfortunately, as I understand that NATO and the European Union, they cannot to create the strong strategy, a strong concept, how to deal with current situation in Black Sea. Mr. Rachev, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have prepared presentation, but I was interested to listen to the discussion. I was surprised that you put the bilateral relations in the context of this title, New Geopolitics. I would like to see where the new geopolitics are. I personally, I have a greatly strong, very strong negative attitude towards geopolitics. I'm afraid from geopolitics, and when I listen geopolitics, that I always think that someone would like to control me, my space, to establish information, military, political, economic, etc. control. So yes, there is an attitude towards geopolitics called critical geopolitics that is saying that geography should not be obstacle. Geography should be a facilitator of our good relationships. And for me, this is the right approach. From the presentations, before to answer directly to your questions, from the presentation, I mentioned several issues that actually are common for the two countries, and they have a negative impact on both the international opinion about our countries and our domestic developments. And first, what was repeated many times was about the historical paradigm. So we are too much focused on the historical paradigm without clearly explaining the three probably most important components. First, history itself. Second, the transition from Cold War to the to contemporary realities, and the third element is post-communism. So what is post-Sovietism? What is post-communism? What is related to the establishment of Kiev Rus and Moscow Kingdom? Everything is mixture, and everybody is abroad and at home is using this for specific purposes. So one of the roles of the intellectuals, I think, is to make these distinctions clear, because of the emphasis of the former belonging to the Soviet bloc, we are forgetting usually that post-communism is not priority for our countries anymore. We don't have, even the Russians, they don't have communist attitudes so much. They would like to see, as Putin said, Soviet Union in one or another, not exactly communism, because the paradigm is changing. Absolutely the same in Bulgaria. We don't have pro-communist attitudes. Maybe some issues that related to public order, to anti-corruption, etc. But this is not about communism. 30 years later, new generations grow without knowing realities of communism. The second paradigm is the security paradigm. As Plamen said, and as the colleague from Ukraine also confirmed, we, under the pressure of the security paradigm, we lost a lot of time for reforms, which is actually for both countries, the 90s were completely lost. And we left the 90s in much worse situation than we entered into the 90s. This is amazing failure of both countries. And it is very, it should be very well estimated. Why? Because the movement of Bulgaria towards European Union and NATO, as Plamen said, it was not based on referendum. it was based on our domestic collapse. Absolutely Maidan, 100% Maidan, but not so publicly explained. But in our souls, this was Maidan. We said in 1997, we do not trust ourselves anymore. We should move to European Union and NATO in order to escape from ourselves. This is the reality. And I think that the similarities between the two cases should be learned by the next generation. And it comes to the third problem, common problem. We do not live in democracy. We are still in transition. Even being member of European Union and NATO for more than 10 years, we suffer from the poorly established democracy. And one of the common problems in the two cases, which is before second problem, which is poor governance, not good governance, but poor governance. But the beginning of everything is the low quality of our political parties. No, Volen Sidorov and Ataka is not the most important case. The most important is that the leading party has no political content, essence, substance. Do you remember the name of the political parties during the last elections in Ukraine? Project Groismana, Bloc Poroshenko, these are leadership, Klitschko, these are personalities, no political ideas. What is European in these political parties? No, they are trying to distinguish between them. On this basis, successful democracy could not happen, even during your generation. This is a common fundamental problem. And the fourth problem, in my understanding, which is most on the experience of Bulgaria, is the unsuccessful integration process. What we did especially during the integration towards with European Union, we established a very good team with excellent negotiators, staff which knows the Brussels language, and they opened chapters, closed chapters, opened chapters. The process finished successfully, but the society was not engaged, the economy was not engaged, the business was not engaged, and the most important, organizations, state organizations were not engaged. And we entered the union with all deficits from the 90s. And we still suffering from this because these deficits are deeply grounded in the current legislation. So this is a fundamental issue that you have to study in this painful experience in Bulgaria, because it's very close to your realities. Yes. Now let me answer to your direct question about Black Sea. I remember the early 90s when there was a Harvard University-based Black Sea Strategy Group. And I was invited, I was Lieutenant Colonel then, and I was invited because I was the Deputy Director of the National Security Studies Center, which was Ministry of Defense body. But from Ukrainian side, representatives was Ivana Klimpush. She was still Klimpush, not Tsintsadzada. So many years ago, but this was a Turkish idea. There was no any other political project that aimed to build a political or economic or security entity around the Black Sea. So Black Sea Economic Zone was the part of the Turkish integration project. And by the way, it was especially supported by Russia, and especially in the context of security. So they were the only partners around the Black Sea that would like to have something different than the perspective of being European Union and NATO members. So we are talking about Black Sea, but Black Sea is most of all a geographical area. It's not a political area. We are talking more about the 3 seas than about Black Sea recently. So we have to keep, when we discuss geopolitical issues, indeed. Second point is that, unfortunately, our countries and this part of the Black Sea is a cross point of 3 integration projects: the European integration project, the Russian one, and the Turkish one. So we can benefit from the 3, but also we can suffer from the 3. So the issue of we should be smart. In order to be successful, we should be smart. This is the only answer. So geography is unavoidable if we talk about geopolitics. If you're neighbor of Russia, you have to learn how to live with a powerful neighbor. There is no any other escape from this. You should be clever. So one of the simplest example is Finland, Finnish example. Being successful at home is the only one solution to be a neighbor to Russia. Yeah, it is simply to say, but as a general direction, I think that this is only one. In the same way, we cannot escape from our realities that are related to Russia. It's not about the memories of the past. The memories about the history of Bulgarian-Russian relations are in our souls and minds. They have nothing in common with politics. So we are trying to be completely European, and we are trying to promote our national interest being with Russia. But we made a fundamental mistake that probably you can avoid this. And this, as Plamen said, the process of privatization, some strategic objects were delivered to Russian owners. If you look at from geoeconomic point of view, if you look at the Lukoil, for example, Lukoil privatized Odessa, Plošť refinery in Odessa, in Plošť, in Burgas in Bulgaria, then turned western, Niš in Serbia, and the final point was the refinery in Croatia. So they established a network that is famous network, because in Bulgaria this is not Lukoil Burgas is not the only and the most powerful source of fuel, but it is capable to provide fuel to European Turkey and part of the Macedonian and part of the northern Greece. So very powerful unit, but it is able to influence everything in the country through the cost of the fuel. And never forget that these entities always love, especially managed by Kremlin, these entities would like always to engage in politics. The former chairman of Lukoil was a Bulgarian man. Now it's not Bulgarian, but the former was Bulgarian. It was known that he was delivering money to every political party. And all the anti-system parties, all the anti-European and anti-NATO parties were established in Burgas, not in another. So this is the essence of geopolitics. But we have to find a solution of this problem, these economic problems. Recently, the opportunities are not limited to China money. China is not a different player. China is, if you look what China did in Southeast Asia and in Africa, it was buying international support through some deliveries of some money. So we should avoid soul simplification. moving from Russian economic dependence towards Chinese economic dependence is not the clever way. So we have much more capacity, even exchanging between us, but it is about regional capacity. So exchange within the region, the exchange between Bulgaria and Western Balkan countries is not comparable with what we exchange with Turkey. Turkey is our second biggest partner after Germany. So there are a lot of opportunities that have to be exploited by the next generation. And the third point is about security. I don't believe that we have to combine our efforts in military terms. Yes, mutual cooperation, exchange of military people for education, joint trainings, etc. Everything is necessary, but this is not about building regional balances, because you're forgetting the third part in this regional balance is Turkey. Turkey has its own attitude toward. If Turkey would like to have such combined efforts, it will happen. But it was proposed for a very short period of time when Turkey and Russia had struggles, open struggles. And then Turkey pushed Bulgaria, Romania, let's establish fleet. This is not the way in 21st century. 21st century is about other national elements of power. And I think that Ukraine has a tremendous capacity in the other components of power. Yes, security cooperation is necessary, but not in the context of building balances. This game with Russia, I don't believe that this is the most important. Definitely the deployment of military forces on Crimea has no other value than related to Ukraine and the post-Soviet space. These deployments are not regarding Bosphorus and the NATO members of Black Sea. If you account carefully, even the missiles, no, that is not the case. There is another point from geopolitical perspective, is that if you look at the Russian efforts, we can identify movement towards the south, the great south, from India and Pakistan through Syria, Arabian countries down to the Persian Gulf. So maybe Black Sea should be seen from this perspective of Russian geopolitics, because this is more perspective in terms of gaining influence and making money, because these countries are eager to buy especially Russian weapons. I don't know what else they can buy, but especially Russian weapons. So it's understandable that the Russian foreign policy, especially policy of influence, should be directed towards this part of the world. So unfortunately, I was not so military as should be, but as a military man, I understand that military has limits, and we should not use the militaries before everything else. Another lesson from the Balkans is that the regional cooperation, essential regional cooperation on the Balkans, was established during the NATO engagement against Serbia. And we were very active during this period, meetings of the ministers of defense, meetings of the chief of general staff, etc. When this engagement, and especially the Americans, withdrew from the region, everything was declining. We didn't succeed to move from the regional military cooperation towards economic and political one. So I always prefer, despite being military man, I always prefer to put the politics first, economy second, and after that, everything else. There was a question about should be tourism put on the first place. Yes, if the issue of securitization is doing exactly this one. Our prime minister said, see, there are 2 million migrants in Turkey ready to cross Bulgaria on the road to the Central Europe. We have to build a fence. And we built Klon. During the Warsaw Pact, this was Klon around the border. Now we build. Everybody knows that if there are 2 million people, this Klon cannot stop them. But this is securitization. If the prime minister would like to make tourism #1, he can do it and say that the security of Bulgaria depends on this tourism. That's the reality.
Okay, Mr. Rushev, thank you very much, and absolutely interesting and great opinion. I am not agree with you about the 21st century in Black Sea. Unfortunately, we live in 18th century, because if you estimate what Russia is doing, we have the 300 missiles in one salvo now, the caliber missiles with range of 2,000 kilometers. And I'm not sure that it's only about Ukraine. And I'm not sure that Russia, when he occupied not only Crimea, but territorial and economical water around Crimea, it means that 100 kilometers of water, of Ukrainian water, international water, now under total control of Russians, and they don't want talking about culture, economy, good relations, harmonizations, and then such a projects which, of course, were very popular before 2014. I would say that Ukraine was absolutely open for all of peaceful and economical projects before 2014. Unfortunately, Russia decided to act another way, and it wasn't Ukraine which started this war. Unfortunately, Ukraine doesn't have any other variants to build military infrastructure together with Romania. Now we, together with Romania, the closest partner, will build military forces. Unfortunately, because if we will still on this situation like we now, Russia will blockade Odessa tomorrow, maybe today. It's reality. We don't have any military instrument to stop it. And Russians are staying close to Odessa than to occupied Crimea in the sea. Russian ships every day staying closer to Odessa, making provocations than to Crimea. So it's absolutely a difficult situation. And unfortunately, I'd like to live in very nice, peaceful Black Sea, which was actually before 2014, but now we don't have this opportunity, I think. I'd like to ask our Bulgarian colleagues one more questions about these explosions in the Czech Republic and Bulgaria, and connected these scandals. What is the real situation? What is the consequences now, and what could be consequences for Bulgarian positions in NATO, Bulgarian's positions in the region, and maybe internal and external positions from Bulgaria? Because yesterday I had a meeting with Czech colleagues. They have a very strong altitude on this, and they very decisive on the making more strong steps regarding Russia in this situation. What about Bulgaria? Who wants to answer first? I like to ask Plamen, Vassil. What do you think about it?
Okay. For the time being, there is nothing completely confirmed about this explosion in these weapon storages. Most probably it is connected with the fact that some Bulgarian businessmen exported weapons for Ukraine. But, and also, you know, this story that this guy, Mr. Emilian Gebrev, who is owner of such a company that make trade with weapons, had some problems several years ago, maybe with the same poison that was poisoned Litvinenko in England with this Novichok. And it is also one clue that maybe Russians were involved in this case. But for the time being, we have nothing confirmed. I mean, not in some certainty like it was in Czech Republic, where the prime minister declared that Russian spies were involved in these explosions in military storages.
Mr. Sotirov, we have some.
Yeah, okay. I agree with what Plamen said. The point is that the former government, which just left power, tried to neglect this case for reasons which still remain probably unclear to us. But according to me, they were connected with the kind of secret relationship which our former prime minister developed with Mr. Putin, and he obviously had some dealings with him, which we still don't know. And I only hope that the new government which came now probably will this policy will continue with the government which will be established after the forthcoming elections. We'll try to clear this picture with a and to find the real truth behind it. I think that really this guy Gebrev, he was doing business, of course, and he was trying to export materials, ammunition to Ukraine. But this will only become clear if there is a good investigation, and I really hope that the new government will try to establish the facts about that. But we still have in the beginning of this new situation in Bulgaria. By the way, I want to congratulate Igor. He made a very good analysis of the situation in Bulgaria, which can explain many things. And what we are expecting now that probably the next government will try to deepen this, or to propose the reforms which are still we were waiting reforms. We're waiting for them for 30 years now. And I also want to agree with Igor, and also with what Valery said, that sorry, do you hear me? Can you see me? Yeah, okay. That really the best politics is about what we have to rely on if we want to have mutual the best mutual relationship is good governance. This is the best security for our countries. We have lots of reformed territory, lots of unresolved problems, and we want to go on preparing for very important military steps in the future. I think we cannot rely on that if we don't first make a good internal, which will resolve our internal problems. The best security for ourselves is when we convince our people, the peoples of both countries, that they really live better than under communism. And this is still an unresolved problem, because if we have nostalgia for communism and for former times, it is because of the fact that a lot of people, majority of people, still don't live better. There are, of course, very rich people who have flourished during that period, but this is because of corruption and because of other other circumstances. I think probably as far as this situation is concerned with, I see that Valery has disappeared. He was the military man who could probably say something more about, especially the situation with the ammunition crisis, the ammunition scandal, and Gabriel, but I don't see him now. But I agree with him that we can't explain to our people why we have to be so close and have good relations and mutual understanding, while we still don't have good governance, in which we don't have government in which we can believe, which we can trust. I think there's a lot of mistrust in public institutions, in governments, in both countries, in Ukraine and Bulgaria. And this is something which is an obstacle to our better mutual understanding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sotirov. We have in our audience the Zlatko Hadžidjadić from Bosnia. Zlatko, would you like to say something from your point of view? You are like external observer of the discussion and a bit from the external side. What do you think about our discussion and our positions? Sometimes different positions.
I would like, thank you, Mykhailo, and I would actually like to continue what Mr. Sotirov was trying to tell us, and I would make a reference on that. I really appreciate the way he presented it. He said we have to teach our people to appreciate their life in this kind of system rather than the other one. I would say that we all, and I lived under communist regime, perhaps a more light than the one in the Soviet Union or the rest of Eastern Europe. But I would say that most of us actually do have a kind of inferiority complex, I would call it like that, in relations to the West and Europe in general. We believe that their system was necessarily better. Capitalism won not because it was better, I would say. It was stronger. Perhaps it was even worse. Mr. Sotirov said something which is really relevant for my point of view. He said many people are worse off. There are very rich people, but many people live in worse conditions than they used to. I would say that that's the essence of the thing. Yes, we have imported another system. Communism was also imported or imposed, call it whatever you like. Perhaps in Yugoslavia it was self-imposed because the Communist Party was fighting the entire battle against the Nazi regime in the Second World War, so it actually was not liberated by the Soviet Union and so on. But nevertheless, whether imported or self-imposed or self-promoted, whatever we call it, communism was a legitimate system in many respects, in the sense that it was providing social security to most of the population. What capitalism is doing is far from that, and what we have imported, all of us, into our countries is a system which is making some people terribly rich and so many people very insecure about their social position, whether they are going to survive the next day or not. And I believe that we have all experienced that. Being some kind of, well, academics or scholars or analysts or whatever we call ourselves, we have also experienced that. This kind of insecurity is especially present among what used to be called working classes, and they certainly believe that it was better under the communist regime. So the communist regime cannot be revived, I would say. But there are some elements from that regime that should be taken into account in my view. And I believe that some kind of capitalism that is present in Germany or in Sweden, which I rather called socialism rather than capitalism, if I'm being asked about the labels, is something that is to be looked upon by the entire East European countries, I mean East of Europe, simply because of these social aspects of their variant of capitalism. Unfortunately, what the entire Eastern Europe imported after the fall of communism is the so-called liberal capitalism, or neoliberal capitalism, if you like, in which some people are really becoming ever richer and the rest of society is becoming ever poorer. And that's something which should not be looked upon as an ideal. We are talking about reforms and so on. Whenever we are talking about reforms, we are actually talking about the reforms that we are being told to promote by some kind of neoliberal capitalist ideologists, or by the countries which are pursuing neoliberal type of capitalism. And eventually what we get as a result is this kind of society in which some people really get ever richer and the rest of society is quite insecure about their very survival. So I would say that that is something that we should all take into account. We are not really pursuing the right path if we are listening to others. We should all find a way of survival for the majority of the population. We cannot restore communism, I'm aware of it, and I'm not nostalgic about it at all, but we can promote a model that is suitable to our own societies, not necessarily to blindly listen to what others say, because we are always being told to promote reforms which are neoliberal reforms, nothing else but neoliberal reforms. And neoliberal capitalism is withering away even in the US. We can see that the US suffers from many problems about insecurity of the majority of the population. In their conditions, it is turning into some kind of right-wing extremism as a response to that. But the root of the problem is this kind of neoliberal model that is making so many people terribly poor. And that is something not to be followed, that is something not to be listened to. And if we are talking about reforms, we have to find our own path to these reforms rather than blindly listen to what others say, whoever they are. So that would be my point.
Thank you very much, Zlatko, for giving us a little bit external point of view. And as usually, you was very clear about the differences between self-developed geopolitics or geopolitics was created by influence of somebody. Actually, our discussion was about it. Should we be passive or be active in creating of our geopolitics, I mean, Ukraine and Bulgaria? And finishing our meeting, I'd like to ask our speakers and our discussants to say several words, if you want, of course, about the next meetings, about our next communications, because I define for myself several issues which we could actually make a main focus and make topics for next meetings like security, I mean, in Black Sea and general security, minority issues, which is very important, economy, of course, and history. This creating a new history, because the old history is not the real history. I think it's more a mythology of from the Soviet times, and unfortunately we still live in this mythology. So colleagues, gentlemen, please, if you'd like to say something on the finishing, you're welcome. Artem.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for organizing such an event, because, for example, I can say that for a majority of Ukrainian, not only ordinary people, but for experts, Bulgaria is terra incognita. Practically, we do not knew about, maybe our knowledge about Bulgaria finished like on 90s. And unfortunately, we do not have imagination about what are the internal process in Bulgaria, modern internal process, economics of Bulgaria, and culture of Bulgaria. That's why I think it's necessary to maybe to continue to involve in our discussion more and more experts, or maybe to formate maybe some pool of experts who will specialize in the problems of bilateral relations, or problems of security, and involving of Bulgaria and Ukraine into making of Black Sea security. About future issues, yes, security issue is important, I agree, but as it was shown during our meeting, we see that we have, yes, we have some maybe problems with discussing, especially because of specifics of politics, Bulgaria. I proposed maybe about minority also. It's only in one gate play, because it's difficult to discuss by Ukrainian minority, but because Bulgarian minority, it's lived compactly, it lives 200 years, more than 200 years. It has some cultural problems, some political problems with Bulgarians, and so on. That's why maybe I can propose you first a problem of cooperation in multilateral organization. I mean, what it means. I mean a Black Sea Economic Cooperation, PSEC, because yes, it also have problems in functioning because of Russian aggression against Ukraine. But at the same time, Ukraine last year proposed, for example, not only its vision, but also proposes a person for for presidency in PSEC. Second, it's cooperation in relations in preserving of Black Sea. Also, we have a Black Sea Commission, but because of Russian aggression and Russians' intentions to legitimate Crimea's occupation, Ukraine should blockade a work of Black Sea Commission, but at the same time we should propose another mechanisms for maybe bilateral mechanism for prevention of Black Sea pollution. It's a very big problem in Black Sea pollution. And a third point, it's maybe is it possible for Bulgaria, it's connected with a security question, a Crimean platform, and maybe presence or activity or involving of activity of Bulgaria into Crimean platform. I can remind Mykhailo, a formal meeting of experts on Crimean platform, yes, last week, and as a Ukrainian expert, I see also my maybe task for better coordination, cooperation, and discussion with our Bulgarian colleagues. Problems which are connected with the security, national security of Ukraine, is a problem of Crimea, and the problem of security totally in Black Sea. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else? Also, Mr. Sotirov, please.
Do you hear me? Okay. A couple of points, probably. Mykhailo, you're talking about the Russian myths and Russian mythology, which still dominates our minds so many years after the fall of communism. But I think there is a point to make here that why do we have this mythology still existing? I think the answer should be that we still don't know, and Zlatko was speaking about that. We still don't know where we are heading now. We are heading to capitalism, to neoliberal capitalism, or to what kind of future system which still hasn't proved that it's a better one. And this is a thing we have to discuss. In a way, we East Europeans, Bulgarians and Ukrainians included, kind of disbalanced in our attitudes. Should we choose the American path or the European path? Because it's obvious that Europe, the European Union, I mean, and America and the United States, they have quite different approaches and quite different visions for our relation, for our region, for the Black Sea region. Not only for the Balkans, it's not for Eastern Europe in general. And this is a very important thing, especially in the present situation. We didn't mention here about the deep contradictions between the European and the American view and American politics towards the present situation, which is a very dangerous one, and where this can lead to. And this is one of the reasons why what I said already. Bulgaria's governments, but not only Bulgaria, but all Balkan states have their reluctance how to behave in this situation. But we didn't mention another thing today, which I think may be a point for good future discussion. What the role of Turkey in general is in this situation. Turkey is a very, very important player. Turkey is controlling the straits, Although we have the Montreal agreements, Turkey is starting to build another canal now, which is parallel to the Bosphorus, which will be a completely new element in the strategic situation in the Black Sea, because as far as I understand, as a matter of law, the Montreal agreement refers only to natural waterways connecting the Black Sea and the Aegean and the Mediterranean, but it will not be irrelevant in case of building an artificial way. This is part of the problem about Turkey, which has a very, very special place in the strategic game in the Black Sea. We have to discuss that. By the way, talking about the need for visions or strategies of the countries in the region towards the geostrategic situation in the Black Sea, I just can notice a very strange, probably interesting fact that the only two countries which have real strategic vision and planning about what is to happen in the Black Sea, these are Russia and Turkey. And this is, by the way, no coincidence, according to me, but the Russians and the Turkish have successfully managed to cooperate in kind of create a balanced relationship instead of all the contradictions they have. This is a very important problem, which also has a great impact on the situation in our region. So probably discussing the role of Turkey in relation to Russia, to Ukraine, and so on, is a very important subject which we can discuss in the future. Also, another problem is the problem of migration. Until now, we have got migrations from Europe and from Africa and Asia through Turkey to Europe, or through other channels. But what can you imagine what will happen in case of a military conflict here? We can have lots of migration streams from Ukraine to somewhere, and this is something unthinkable which can happen. Where Europe can be overwhelmed. This is one of the reasons Europeans want to avoid war in any situation in our region. These are just subjects for thought, I would say, but we can discuss them. Thank you. I want to thank Mykhailo for this wonderful discussion which he organized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sotirov, for your ideas. I'd like to give the floor to Igor Fedyk, but before I say, do not forget that the idea by Artem Fylypenko that Crimean platform is absolutely great opportunity for think tanks, for non-government think tanks, because they have not only governmental track but non-governmental track. And we had a meeting last week about this, that all of possible international non-governmental think tanks and experts, if you'd like, you could join to Crimean platform and participate in all of issues and discussing all of possible problems and questions. And Mr. Sotirov, thank you for your propositions about Turkey, because yeah, I think that obviously we should ask Turkish experts and together make a joint event about the Black Sea issues, and maybe even Russians experts, why not? And then try to discuss the issues of the possible ways of developments in Black Sea, because yeah, the Straits problem, the possible new geopolitics of Turkey. Actually, Turkey has absolutely excellent relations with Ukraine, in the same very pragmatic relations with Russia. And,
which is very interesting, by the way.
Yeah, it's not bad, it's not good, it's reality. And I think that Ukraine, Ukraine is trying to use it very pragmatic way, and I like it, because what we have now with Turkey, it's a very nice military cooperation, military technical cooperation, and I think that Turkey, I would say that it's the most successful partner in defense industry. Even United States is not so successful. So I think it's a definitely great topic for discussion. So thank you for your ideas, Mr. Sotirov. And now Igor Fedyk, please, floor is yours for final words.
Thank you. You mentioned Turkey, Russia, Bulgaria, just one more country, Romania also.
Absolutely sure. This that we Igor, you know that for several last years we have very great cooperation with Turkey in all levels, and very interesting that it looks like very close, Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, but absolutely different altitudes and different relations. I think we should discuss it together.
Yeah, and that will be interesting to listen to Bulgarian and Romanian colleagues when they talk about their cooperation, because this is something that is being underestimated these years. Small reflection of what Mr. Hadzideh said, that communist regime couldn't be revived. I fully agree with that. But we should tell this to Mr. Putin, who still is trying to restore the Soviet Union, the Soviet past. Yes, it will not be the communist regime, but it's more or less like it was. And when we, yeah, of course, we don't know. Also, we agree that we don't know where we move to what kind of world we move today. But I'm sure that. And we have to be sure that there is a world, there is a system or whatever that we have, that we don't have to move to. This is the communist system. This is our past. So it's anyway, it's the way and the transition from the communist past to the liberal one is much better than what we had in some 30 years ago. And coming back to Ukraine and Bulgaria, as Artem mentioned, Bulgaria is still some kind of terra incognita in Ukraine, but due to him and to me, who continue to cover the Bulgarian topic in Ukraine, and due to such meetings, we'll give the possibility for Ukrainian people to know more about this beautiful country. And when talking about our development, our countries and our relations, I'd like to repeat again that we just have to do our part. To do our part to make reforms and don't pay attention on what our big brother, so-called big brother, wants us and tell us to do. So, thank you again for the possibility to participate in this beautiful event. And as a proposition, it would be great, I think, to have offline meetings somewhere in Kyiv or in Sofia next time. It's much better than to sit here in front of the computer, you know, and so.
But that depends on the epidemiological situation in the future.
Okay, we all make the vaccinations, and that will not be a question anymore.
Yeah, I think the physical contact now, it's a new challenge for us, because again, talking about the last meeting on the Crimean platform, Artem participated. It was very interesting that people didn't understand how to deal with real people, and it was like I told that on the coffee break. I told that maybe we should switch on the Zoom and try to communicate, but it was something like a problem with communications of the real world. Yeah, it's crazy, but we should practice our real physical contacts. So I think it will be absolutely happiness to have a real meetings on any topics. Mr. Dimitrov, please, your final words.
I also think that it will be better to discuss security issues in the Black Sea region, and in this way we include Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, and Ukraine, of course. Historical discussions are not very fruitful. I think, besides the fact that I'm historian by education, actually, maybe you know that one of the first prime minister of Soviet Ukraine was Bulgarian, Christian Rakovsky. Christian Rakovsky in Bulgarian, Christian in Soviet Union. But anyway, security issues is better to discuss, I think. And also, I can join this proposal for offline meetings, but we will see in the future. And finally, thank you very much for organizing this discussion today, and hope to see you again in this format or offline.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have our experience with Poland, and the Ukrainian-Polish discussions on the historical topic always absolutely crazy, and I support you that maybe it's better to talk about security and culture, but without deeping on the historical issues. But sometimes it's interesting to find the new layers in history, because if you're talking about the Bulgarian-Ukrainian relations in history, it always going through the prism of Russian Soviet understanding. And sometimes it's very interesting to find the real Ukrainian Bulgarian issues, even during these wars in 18th century. It was a lot of issues which we just simply don't know. So thank you very much again, colleagues, friends. I'm happy that we organized this event, and to be honest, I didn't expect that we cover so many topics, so many issues, but I think it was very nice try to start. And I think we should definitely continue to discuss our relations, trying to be more complex, trying to be more.
Just one point.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You know, I'm the vice president of a European Journalists Association. That's a group of European journalists from all European countries. Unfortunately, we still don't have membership in Ukraine, but we, in normal times, not like that now. We organize every year a congress discussing a single subject we should choose. I think Ukraine is a very good subject in the regional problems of the Black Sea region and Ukraine included, that we can, this can be a topic of one of our future congresses in normal circumstances. And if you help us with some, providing some journalists which could join our organization, and members and experts also which can come and speak to in front of this, which is a congress of about 100 people, usually not more, from all European countries. And I think this will be a very interesting thing to do this in Ukraine someday, under the umbrella and the participation and cooperation with your organization.
Absolutely great proposition. I think that technical details we could discuss separately and think about it. Absolutely great idea. So thank you very much, colleagues, friends, and I think we're looking forward to organize new events and discuss new issues. Thank you very much.